Hi, this is Patty Lutsky, and this webinar is about Arbortext tips and tricks for using Editor with Windchill. I am a product management director with PTC, and I've been with Arbortext, since before the PTC acquisition, saying maybe 20 years now. And I have been working with the Arbortext Editor Windchill integration since the very beginning of it, so about 15 years now. And for this webinar, I want to share some of the tips and tricks that I find particularly useful, and hopefully you'll find them useful too. Now, I do want to warn you, this is not a tutorial. I will try to describe some of the overall concepts for people who maybe are not familiar with the integration, but I'm not going to go into detail of specifically how to do the basic features. Now this slide shows the overall landscape of our Arbortext products, and we often talk in terms of create, manage, and deliver of technical information. And with PTC, we maintain this digital thread where the content from CAD can be reused in your technical information. But for this presentation, I'm really going to just focus on create, and in particular authoring XML content, and on manage and the content management capabilities within Windchill. I will touch a little bit also on some of what we can do for product-based organization and translation management. And this shows the products that are involved with our create, manage, and deliver capabilities for technical information. You can see on the left, Arbortext Editor will be what I'll talk about most today. Then within Manage, there are different levels of capability within Windchill. So Windchill Base provides the basic document management. Then with Windchill Advanced plus the service parts information and instruction add-on, you also get some context-based content management where you can tie your content directly to the product information. Then with Windchill Premium and again, the service parts information and instruction module, that supports service parts catalogs. But I won't be getting into service parts catalogs today. Then under Deliver, there's Arbortext Publishing Engine, which is used to create the published documents, and also Arbortext Content Delivery, which is our electronic delivery portal. We also have Layout Developer for developing layouts, and Vuforia for the augmented and virtual reality delivery. So when you look in our Help Center documentation, we refer to the integration as Arbortext PTC Server Connection. And the reason for that is that Windchill comes in various variants, as we just saw, and they might have different names. For instance, in the past, it was referred to as Project Link versus PDM Link. As you saw, now we've got Windchill Base, Windchill Advanced. And so really the Arbortext integration works with all of these variants. So we just refer to it more generically as PTC Server Connection. And this slide shows some of the basic capabilities. For instance, while you're editing a document, Arbortext Editor is aware that it came from Windchill, and it will show you the checkout status. For instance, in this case, it's a yellow box indicating it's not checked out. If it were checked out to me, I would get a different icon, or if it were checked out to someone else, there'd be a different icon. This screenshot is showing the ability to see the contents of a Windchill folder in our DITA resource manager. And then this screenshot shows our CMS browser, which allows you also to see the contents of a folder, and as we'll see in a bit, the contents also of your information structures or publication structures. And as you can see, it has basic capabilities that you would expect in terms of view, edit, view properties, checkout, check-in, and so on. So these are the 4 areas that I'll cover today, 4 sort of areas of tips and tricks. The first will be about comparing multiple versions of a document. Then I'll talk about working with publication structures, then working with DITAMAPS, and the last section will be about saved searches. So let's start with comparing multiple versions of a document. This capability is not new. It's been available since 7.0 M50, but I find it particularly handy and wanted to make sure you were aware of it. Within Arbortext Editor, we've always had the ability to compare 2 different XML documents that are on the file system. But when you're working with Windchill, you can also compare against different versions of a document. So in this example, you can see you use the compare version menu choice, which is only available when you're connected to a Windchill server. And then it will give you the list of versions that you can choose. And then it'll show you the difference between the version you have loaded and the version you selected. And another handy feature is that you can compare the checked out version to see all of the changes you've made since the last time this document was checked in. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and open Arbortext Editor. I've already connected to my Windchill server, so I can open a document that is from the Windchill server. And you can see at this point, it's not checked out to me. It has that yellow box. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the Tools Compare version. And this is showing me the different versions that have been created so far. So I'm just going to select one and do a comparison. And you can see this is showing me the changes that have happened from the version that I've loaded to that other version that I selected. And you can see in this case, I did a wording change, and then I inserted one extra word here. Now I'm going to go ahead and check this document out and then make a few changes. So here is a set of steps of what to do. I'm just going to go ahead and add another step. Another step I added. And then also I'm going to go ahead and change here where it says insert a new para tag. I'm going to call it a para element rather than tag. Okay, now let's say I'm ready to check this in, but I just want to make sure that I've done the changes that I intended to. What I can do is say Tools Compare Version and select the version that I'm working off of. So this is the previously checked in version. And sure enough, I see these 2 changes that I just made. Another step I added and then change tag to element. So then at this point, I could do a check-in and go ahead and create the new version since it contains what I wanted it to. I'm just going to skip that for now, but you get the idea. So let me go ahead and close this out for now. And let's go back to the presentation. Okay, the next topic is working with publication structures in Editor. Now, just to give a little background of what is a publication structure and information structure. So when you're working with the SPII add-on, and we used to refer to this as Service Information Manager and Service Parts. And in fact, the product name Service Information Manager still comes up. I know I'll refer to it from time to time as well. So, essentially you'll know what I'm referring to. But within Service Information Manager, you're able to organize your technical information according to the product that you're describing. And we start with an information structure. The idea being that an information structure would contain all of the information about this product, the parts list, the illustrations, the documents, and it's organized according to the product structure. Now, you can use that information structure to create a publication structure. A publication structure is specific to an output that you want to get. In this case, it's a repair manual. And you would use certain parts from the information structure in your publication structure. Now, this is also showing, this graphic shows that you can have optionality within really your information structure or publication structure. In this case, you might have certain topics that are relevant for a two-wheel drive model as opposed to a four-wheel drive model. And then take the publication structure, send it to Arbortext publishing engine to publish it, and create your two PDFs, in this case, the two repair manuals, four-wheel drive, two-wheel drive. Of course, you might only have one PDF output. But that's the very high-level overview of what I'm talking about when I'm referring to information structures and publication structures. Now, when you're working in Arbortext Editor in the CMS browser, you can browse information structures, and that's been available for quite a while so that you can add content directly to the information structure. But then also, since our 7.1 M40 version, you can also browse the publication structures and see the structure that you've created for a publication structure. And this can be useful for locating individual topics of the publication structure. You also can select the publication structure for use as where new objects will be. So in this new objects in area where you can click use selection, you can select one of these publication structure sections. And when you do that, it will also be creating that topic in a folder, because when you add something to a publication structure, it'll be added to the structure and in a folder, and it will use the folder that was previously associated in Windchill as the default content location for that particular publication section. As well, as we'll see in a moment, the new objects in field can be handy for those of you that are familiar with burst config files. Now, burst configuration files are the way that you set up how new objects get created when you create a new object from Arbortext Editor. I'm not going to go into the details of burst configuration files. That could be a whole nother webinar, and let me know if that's something you might be interested in. But the syntax would be what you would use if you wanted to use a publication structure in a burst config file. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at this in action. So I'm back in Arbortext Editor, and I'm going to open the CMS browser, and I'm going to expand to my four-wheel drive loader product. And here you can see I can expand either in terms of information structures, publication structures, or folders. It's really three different ways to view the content. But I want to expand the publication structure. And if I look at a particular area, for instance, loader, now I'm on a specific document, and I can choose to open that document. Let's just go ahead and click view, and you can see this was the document in that publication structure. Now, the other thing, as I mentioned, that you can do is you can choose. Now, if I'm working in this loader bucket area, I can say, okay, when I create a new topic, I want it to go in that section. And when I click the Use Selection button, you can see that that section will be in this area. And this syntax, this syntax that you say where it says PUBS, this is exactly what you would use to refer to this publication section if you are working in a burst config file. Now let's show the same publication structure in Chrome, and I have that over here. Now in Chrome, you can see in the HTML UI, it's the exact same structure with the operators station and so on. The other thing that you can do with a publication structure is open all topics in editor. And let me just go back to the slide a moment. Okay. So when you do open all topics in editor, what it will do is it will gather together the topics of a particular publication section, and it will open those as one document in the editor using the format that's called a resolved document for editing. So as though it had been opened from a map in Arbortext editor, it'll open this resolved document for editing. And this is particularly useful for if you need to do a global find and replace. For instance, if you want to change something in a number of topics at once, you can use the open all topics in Arbortext editor to do that. So let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to use this section here, and you can see it's got 4 topics. And so I'm going to say open all topics in Arbortext editor. And let me just switch to the edit view so I can see these topics. And here you can see we see each of those topics in Arbortext editor. And one thing that's handy when you're working in this type of view where you're editing multiple topics is you've got the option here to check out all objects, check in all objects, or undo checkout of all the objects in your display here. So in order to make a change, I'm just going to, oops, I'm sorry. I'm going to go ahead and check out all the documents. And actually, it looks like they were previously checked out, so I didn't need to do that in this case. And let's say we want to make a change. Let's do a global find and replace. And we're going to change the word manual, say, to guide, where I see it says operator's manual right here. So if I say replace all, it found it 4 times and replaced it 4 times, 1 in each of these topics. So you could see as I go through operator's guide, it changed it in each of the topics. Now at this point, I can check in all of my changes and it will update each of those objects. So if I say check in all objects, it shows me the objects that have changed and I just say yes. And there I've checked in each of those objects. And so if I go back to the CMS browser and refresh it, if I look in here, here are my 4 objects and you can see they have been checked in. Now this next tip is with regards to translation. Now, just to give a little bit of background on sim translation, again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, but when we talk about translation within Windchill for these Arbortext documents and the information structures, publication structures, we're not talking about doing the actual language translation. The idea is that that would be done by an external vendor, for instance, a language service provider. But within Windchill, the translation management is responsible for packaging up all of the topics and all of the content that needs to be translated so that you can then transmit that package, which is in the form of a zip file, to your translation vendor, and then get the content back from the translation vendor. And when it comes back, it'll be stored as a separate object for that particular language, and there will be a new version of that language-specific version, language-specific document. And one thing that can be particularly useful when you're working with multilingual documents. So if you have more than one source language, for instance, in your publication structure, there's an option when you do a publish where you can publish it as the authored source. And in that case, you would just see the source in its different languages, and you can do this before you've completely translated the document. So let's take a look at what this would look like. If I open, this is a publication structure, and you can see it contains source both in English, and then this section is actually authored in French. So these topics are in French. And if I were to do a publish of this, let's say I wanted to publish and I'm going to publish it in English, I would actually get an error because at this point it has not been completely translated to English yet. There are some of the French topics, for instance, that have not been translated to English. And so if I were to do that, I would get an error similar to this where it says, can't find translation for documents. So that's not what I want to do. Instead, there's this authored source choice, and I can select that and then choose to publish. Now, since this is a demo, I have one already ready, so let me just switch to that. And if we look here, this is the PDF that's already been created. And you can see that it has exactly what was in the source structure. So it has the English topics and then the French topics in one PDF. So that's the authored source choice when you're doing a publish. Okay, the next area that I want to talk about is working with DITAMAPS in Windchill. Now, DITAMAPS are stored in Windchill as a structured dynamic document. So it will have the map itself will be the parent, and then each of the topics will be stored with a link as a child from the parent map. And this is similar to what we have had in the past when with a doc type such as DocBook, where you might have a book and then it has multiple chapters in it, and there are links from the book to the chapters. And of course, if you have a topic that has a shared content, for instance, a caution or a warning, that would also be, for instance, a child of the topic. The warning would be the child. Now, I have heard that there's been some confusion about the tech info. What the tech info is a specific specialization that's used out of the box when you publish publication structures. And in particular, it is used when you're publishing parts list. So if you've got a parts list in Windchill and you're publishing that through, it'll be transformed into tech info. I'm not going to go into the details of parts list today, but there are also tech info specializations for different topic types that might be useful in a publication structure. Now, when you're working with DITAMAPS, there's no requirement to use tech info. You can use standard OASIS data. You can use the specialization that you may have already developed for your content, and that'll work fine when you're working with Windchill. And what we see on the right here, this is the structure as it would show in Arbortext Editor, and then the same structure as it would show in the Windchill HTML UI. And let me, I'm going to show a sample DITAMAP and then also talk about how the DITAMAPs can also be translated. But let's just start, let's take a look at this DITAMAP. We can go ahead and close this one down. So if I go to my CMS browser, in this case, it is in a different product. And it's in a folder since it's this DITAMAP. And you can see it's a DITAMAP with 1, 2, 3, 4 topics. It's just a small map for demonstration purposes. But let's go ahead and take a look at it in Arbortext Editor. You can see it's got these 4 topic refs. And there are multiple views you can see in Arbortext Editor. We can see this is the document map view, doc map view, we refer to it, and also column view, which can be particularly handy for working with maps. Now, if I look at the same, let me take a look at actually the PDF of that. So this is, again, it's a very simple user guide. And this is the English map. It just has the topics about the overview, the motor details, and then a section about tasks and one topic about fixing if it wobbles with this graphic in it. Now, this map can be translated. So you can translate DITAMAPs similar to how you might translate a publication structure. The only caveat is that all of the topics must be ready to be translated when you send it out for translation. When you work with a publication structure, you're able to send out portions of the publication structure to be translated. But with DITAMAPs, because when we create the translated DITAMAP, we need to be able to create the entire compound document. That means that all of the topics must be in the release state. Now, the translated maps themselves can be opened in Arbortext Editor, or we can also see them in Windchill. And so they could be published either way. You could publish the translation from within Arbortext Editor or from within Windchill. Now let me show this same map in Windchill. I'm going to go ahead over here. So this is the map with the 4 topics, and as we saw, this one topic has a graphic. And I can view this translation content table. This is the table that you would use also for a publication structure. So for instance, I happen to know that this map has been translated into Italian. So if I take a look at this, I see for the map and all the topics, they have been translated into Italian. If I choose a different language, let's say I want to look at Greek, if I say show results, it's showing me Greek, it has not been requested. And in general, the status that you're used to, things like in translation, not requested, translated, or requested, are all relevant to DITAMAPs. Now, these states about dictionary and viewable, those are really just specific to publication structures. If I want to open the translated map, let's go ahead and show it here within the Windchill UI. So I'm going to bring this up again. I've got this link here to the translated map. And I'm going to go ahead here and I can see the structure of the translated map. Let me just expand this just a bit. You can see it has all these Italian Italian versions of my topics. And I happen to know that it's stored in a library. So it's in this library called Translated under the Italian section and so on. Now I can also find that same document in Arbortext Editor. So let's go to the CMS browser. If I open my libraries and look in the translated library, I can see here it is under Italian, XML, the ceiling FAM folder, and here's my map. So I can choose to view this in Arbortext Editor, and I see the Italian content that was previously translated. I can also, at this point here in Arbortext Editor, I can choose to publish this, or I could have published it using the Windchill UI. And I'll just show, here is the example of it being the translated PDF as it was generated from within Arbortext Editor, or as it was generated from within Windchill. And pardon my attempt at Italian translation, it may not be what a native speaker would have done. But just for, demonstration purposes. So, in general, DITAMAPS do have a number of features available when you're working with DITAMAPS in Windchill and translated DITAMAPS as well. Okay, my last topic will be about saved searches. Now, within Arbortext Editor, you can work with saved searches. And again, this is not a new feature. This has been available actually since 7.0 of the product. But again, I find it particularly handy, so I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of this. The idea is that if there are searches that you use frequently, you can save them and reuse them in future sessions with Arbortext Editor. Now, these saved searches are not the same searches that you may have saved in the Windchill UI. And the reason is that when you save a search in Arbortext Editor, it is specifically saving the information related to this search dialog box, which is the one that's available within Arbortext Editor. But the saved searches on the Windchill side actually might have a different components to them. And so it doesn't map directly to being able to populate this dialog box in the Arbortext Editor UI. But as you'll see, you can save whatever you've put in this dialog box. So for instance, if you want to save where to search, whether or not to include subtypes, whether to match all criteria or just one of the criteria, and so on, all of that is saved as part of the saved search. So, oops, sorry. Let me switch to Arbortext Editor again. Now within Arbortext Editor, you can bring up the search dialog either by clicking on search in the CMS browser, or also, let me close this down, also in the object search. Either one will work. And here is my search dialog. I want to click on advanced so that I can see the saved searches. And I have already created a few saved searches. So for instance, I want to see, let's say I want to see all the documents authored in English. And this is searching within that Arbortext Editor product that we saw before. Go ahead and do a search, and you can see these are the results of all of the documents that were authored in English. I can also do documents authored in German, and in this case, it's going to search all products for documents authored in German. And you can see it changed the criteria appropriately. Now, I happen to know that there aren't any, so I'll just go ahead and click that. The other thing, we can say documents authored in French, and as we know, there actually are some documents authored in French in that product. If I want to create a new saved search, all I need to do is make some change. In this case, let's do documents authored in Korean. And then I click on save, and it gives me the opportunity to specify the name of that saved. Call it Korean. And then go ahead and run the search. And you can see I do have some documents authored in Korean in that product. Now, the other thing that's particularly handy about this saved search capability in Arbortext Editor is that the searches are saved in an XML file, and it'll be saved in the same folder where your Arbortext preferences are saved. So, you know, general preferences about the way Arbortext behaves and about its layout are stored in this WCF file. And so this separate file, this Windchill save search.xml, can be shared with other users. So if you have a set of searches that you particularly like, you could, for instance, give it to everyone in your work group, and then they would be able to take advantage of that same set of searches. And I'll just show you here. For me, the WCF file, it is stored in under users. So under, you know, C users, my name, app data, roaming, Arbortext editor, that's where the WCF file is. And you see this separate file, Windchill saved search. So that file can be shared with other users. So that's my set of tips and tricks, and I hope you found some of them useful. And let us know if you have other ideas for webinars.